In tonight's shir, we're Be'ez Hashem gonna begin the topic that we started now in the night koilel, together with the morning koilel. Hilchas Eiruvin, Be'emerson, is really almost the whole chelik daled in Mishnah Brura. It's Masechtas Eiruvin. We chose to pick one topic when making an Eiruv where it's very negeya, bungalow colony, and in many other places also. Even if you live in Muncie, you don't use the Eiruv. You have your neighborhood Eiruv. You live in a development, you want to make an Eiruv. So an Eiruv is made with mechitzos and with a tzuras HaPesach. We're focusing be'ikr on Hilchas Tzuras HaPesach, as we'll see what a tzuras HaPesach is, what makes it kosher or not kosher. And furthermore, even in Tzuras HaPesach, there's many different parts, and Be'ez Hashem, we're going to focus on one part of the Tzuras HaPesach. Avada with learning now, Be'ez Hashem, the next few weeks, Hilchas Eiruvin, we're not going to, Pashas not going to be able to build an Eiruv, but at least we'll understand, we'll be part of it, whether if you use the Eiruv, we live here in Muncie, you use the Eiruv, whether if it's the Muncie Eiruv, whether it's your neighborhood Eiruv, we'll know what it's about, how the Eiruv is built, the complications, the people that allow the Muncie Eiruv to happen, check it every week. There's a lot of things that can make it possible. So let's begin and focus, Be'ez Hashem, on the Tzuras HaPesach of Eiruv. The halacha is, it's a din in Siman Shin Mem Hey. That's not the siman we're learning, but the siman over there speaks about carrying is mutin Rishus HaYachid. Arba Rishuyos, and the Shulchan Aruch says in Sif Beis, Ezer Rishus HaYachid. What is a Rishus HaYachid? A Rishus HaYachid is a place that is surrounded by mechitzos. Mokum hamukaf mechitzos gvoya asara tvachim. As long as you have mechitzos, it's a Rishus HaYachid. And if it's a Rishus HaYachid, you can carry in the Rishus HaYachid. The Shulchan Aruch says weiter, Mokum sheyesh lo shalosh mechitzos. If you have a place that only has 3 mechitzos, midoiraisa 3 mechitzos is enough. Meaning to say is you could already carry midoiraisa in a place that has 3 mechitzos. However, midrabanon zok the Shulchan Aruch asru chachamim letaltol boy. You're not allowed to be metaltol in this place. You're not allowed to carry. Ad sheyase shum tikun b'revius. You have to do something. You have to do a tikun, which means, which the Shulchan Aruch weiter in Siman Shin Samach Gimel the Ramah explains. On the 4th side, you have to make a Tzuras HaPesach. Yeah, you have 3 walls. What's with the 4th wall? Of course, if you have 4 walls, so then it's Rishus HaYachid, you can carry. But if you only have 3 walls, legabi the 4th wall, to be able to carry, you have to make a Tzuras HaPesach. Okay. Now, with this, so to speak, basic introduction, let's move on now to Tzuras HaPesach. Tzuras HaPesach is very important, and for a lot of Eiruvin are made only with a Tzuras HaPesach. Meaning to say, as we spoke till now, if you have 4 walls, that's a Rishus HaYachid Gomer. 3 walls is also fine with the Raisa. But the Rabbanah, they want us to close up the 4th wall, and you can put a Tzuras HaPesach. But really, you can make a Tzuras HaPesach around the whole Rishus. This is the Shitas HaRambam. That's not for now. Maybe it'll be a different shir. But Al Kaponim, you have to make a Tzuras HaPesach. What is a Tzuras HaPesach? And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. What is a Tzuras HaPesach? And what makes a Tzuras HaPesach not good? Tzuras HaPesach, Zok the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Shin Samach Beis, that's a siman we're learning. We actually were starting from the beginning, but let's focus tonight on Tzuras HaPesach. The Shulchan Aruch says, Sif Yud Aleph, Mahu Tzuras HaPesach. The taich of a Tzuras HaPesach, which is a doorway. What is a Tzuras HaPesach? Zok the Shulchan Aruch, Kono mikan v'kono mikan. You have to have a beam, a pole on each side. on each side of your property or wherever it's open, you have one beam on one side, one beam on the other side. V'kana al gabeim, and a beam on top of those two beams. And then it says, afilu einin negeya b'hen, even if it doesn't touch, which means if the two beams on the side are only 10 tvachim, and they're not touching the beam on top, it's fine, it's kosher. We're going to focus, Be'ez Hashem, tonight on one part of Tzuras HaPesach. Tzuras HaPesach is two side beams and one beam on the top. For today, Be'ikr, we're going to focus on the beam on top that crosses over. You have two beams on the side, you have a beam on top. The beam on top has a lot of halachas, and we'll see that these halachas make it not so simple to just put up an Eiruv. And even if you put it up and it's simple, it could very easily become puzzle, at least to some shittas. The beam on top, like the Shulchan Aruch says, these are kana on top. That kana, the Shulchan Aruch at the end of the sieve says, does not have to be a beam. In Hilchas Mavoi, these are halacha that it should be a kaira, and it should be wide, and it should be visible. When it comes to an Eiruv, when you're building an Eiruv around the city, or around a complex, around a bungalow colony, the Tzuras HaPesach, the top does not have to be a kaira, a beam. It could even be a string, like the Shulchan Aruch says. The Mishnah Berurah also, Sif Katan Samach Aleph v'Kana al Gabeim v'Hu Adin al Yidei Chavolim. You could do string, and the Bir Halacha explains that string afilu b'mashu. Even if that string is a mashu, it's thin like anything. It's a fisherman's string. It's also kosher. However, even though, which is clearly the halacha, it does not have to be a beam, a string is fine, and even a very thin string. There are those in the poskim that take issue with a fisherman string, with a string that you cannot see, because l'maisi you cannot see it. However, the pashtus in the poskim, the pashtus is that even if it's not visible, it's kosher. Why? Because we don't put that string on top for any hacker. Obviously, you want to know where the Eiruv is to not go out of the Eiruv. But let's say you know for sure where it runs, the property. You know, there's no question about it. You don't have to be able to see the string. It's not there for hacker. The Tzuras HaPesach is like what we're going to learn in the beginning of the Siman. These are din of machitzos. And if it's not machitzos, it's the Tzuras HaPesach. And the Tzuras HaPesach is what enables it to be closed in. Memela, if it's closed in with the Tzuras HaPesach, it doesn't make a difference if you can't see the string, it's still going to be kosher. However, whether if you want to be machmer for those shittas that hold that you have to see it to be able to see it, or actually for a practical reason, whether if you go around checking the Eiruv, or just to know that the Eiruv is up. So some people tie on a little piece of plastic, a piece of shopping bag or something like that, so you could see it blows around in the wind, you could see it very easily. Since we're learning and we see clearly that Tzuras HaPesach has to be that these two beams on the side and one on top, and it has to look like a door, and like we mentioned before, we're going to be focusing on the top beam or the top string. These are din. The Sharetzion brings it from the Poskim. I'll read the lashon of the Sharetzion. The im hachevel shenoisten al gava kanam, the string on top that you run from one beam to another beam. Nichfaf lamata. If it's bending down, which means it's sagging down, but eagle, which means it's a little bit on a circle, a little bit like a half a circle, it's hanging down. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yeshli Zoherli Saknoi. You should be careful. If it's sagging down, it's problematic, and you should be careful to fix it. Why? Explain. It's Alpidim, what's Mavur in the Rishonim. The Rishonim say, when you need a Tzuras HaPesach, a doorway, and now as we're going to see upcoming psulim as well, a doorway means a normal doorway. and it's not a derech for a doorway to have the top part of the door hanging down, sagging down. So Memela, says the Sharet Tziyah, you should be careful that the string is not sagging down. So for this, technically, it's not so problematic when you're putting a string. You just pull it tight. Of course, things can happen later, and a twig could push it down, and that could happen. But when you put a string from one pole to the next pole, tie it strong, pull it tight from one pole to the next pole, and memela it's not going to sag down. But if it sags down, that's problematic, and even a little bit, says the Mishkanas Yaakov, the Chazon Ish, even a little bit is problematic. We're going to get to telephone wires soon, and that's a big discussion. These tshuvas already for years speaking about it. That was how they made Eiruv back in the day. It's not a chiddush of now. But just to bring it as an example, even if you're going to use those wires, take a look at the telephone wires and the electric wires. They sag down a little bit. So, is mavur in some of the poskim even a little bit is problematic. Me'idach, the Imre Yosher, and other poskim, the Imre Yoshers and Cheluk Beis, Simon Kuf Lamed Gimel. I'm going to try to quote as much as I could the Mar Makaimis. So like this, the Olam that's learning, whoever wants, you can look up the Mar Makaimis. The Imre Yosher says up to 3 tvachim it's okay. So even if it's sagging down, up to 3 tvachim it's fine. And the reason for that is because of Lavud. Lavud gives it a din like it's not sagging down, a chiddush. And then if it's not sagging down, you have a very good top doorpost, and that's a regular good Suras HaPesach. They agree to what the Rishonim say, to the Svara and the Rishonim, that the Rishonim say that there's a problem when it's not a normal doorpost. However, when it's within 3 tvachim, that's still called normal because of Lavud. So again, like I mentioned before, this is very noigeya, this nakuda of a string going down. It's also negeya, the shmuz, when it's pushed out either way, which till now we're speaking about, let's say the string is hanging down, so you pull it tight. But what's about if it gets pushed outwards, either outwards or inwards towards your rishus? And that the example would be is if it's next to a tree and the tree kind of is hanging down, pushing away, it grew out, the leaves, it's raining, it's snowing. So this would go into this shaila of the string that has to be straight. We're going to get to it shortly about the string being pushed out, a different problem. But problem number one, when it's hanging down, that's not Suras HaPesach, that's not how a doorway looks. Another din, which discusses how a doorway should look. What happens if the door is hanging down? Which means, I'm sorry, to be clear, it's on a slant. Whether if one doorpost on the right, one post pole of your Eiruv is higher and one is lower, and the string on top is on an angle, but alachson, it's on a slant. It's very noigeya, whether if you live in Muncie and your property is not an even property, or it's in a bungalow colony, and you're building it with Suras HaPesach, you have excellent poles, the string is very tight, there's no trees bothering it, but Lamaisa, the property is not straight, and you're running a string from one pole to the next pole, the string, the top, the doorpost, the top is ba'alachs, and it's on an angle. Is mavur in the Magen Avram, other achroinim, the Mishnah Berurah brings the tzivkot and samach, that it's kosher. Even if it's ba'alachsa in the top, which we're focusing on tonight's shir, the top string, the top pole is on a slant, it's kosher. However, the Sharet Tziyah brings in tzivkot and memvav, he brings that Reb Kiveger is mistapik when it's very slanty. For sure, if you have a big property in the bungalow colonies and it's up a hill, down a hill, Reb Kiveger is mesupek. If it's very slanty, maybe over there, that's already not Suras HaPesach. Yeah, you could find sometimes a door, older house, it shifts, the door gets a little slanty, but a very big slant, that's not shchiach, and the mela it's not going to be, he's mesupek if it's kosher. It blinds like Pischei Shamoi. The Gemara Menachos speaks about having a being mechuyev b'mezuzah, the chiyuv mezuzah on a doorpost. However, the chiyuv mezuzah on a doorpost is only if it's a regular doorpost. If it's Pischei Shamoi, and the Gemara speaks about what it is, whether if it's the two sides are not done properly, or whether the top part is not properly. So Meiler Kivek is Masupik, if it's very slanty, could be that's not called that it's done properly. Lamaisa, the Stimas HaMishnah Brewer that says slanty is okay, and the Chazon Ish, which is Simonai and Daled, Sifkot and Vav, also says that even B'Shipu Agadol, even if it's very slanty, it's still kosher. Now, let's go into the din of Tzuras HaPesach Min Atzad. This is a very important din, which means the halacha is weiter, that you cannot have the top pole, or let's call it for us the string on top. It has to be on top. A doorway has two posts, two beams on the side, and then there's a beam on top that runs across on top of the two side-by-side beams. Right? It's on top. What happens if that beam is not on top of the two beams on the side? It's rather banged onto the two beams, but on the side. You have two beams, for those that could see on Zoom, you have two beams like this, and then you have the beam on top is supposed to be on top of it, as opposed to banged in over here on the side. Min Hatzad, that's not kosher. And that's klor, min Hatzad is klor, not kosher. However, there's an interesting scenario that the Tas says that is kosher, and Lamaisa, we are not makel like this Tas, but the Tas says, what happens if the top beam is in between the two beams, all the way up on top, flush with the two beams? Instead of it being on top, it's right on top, but the nail, to understand it if you're not watching my hands, the nail, instead of it being banged on the top beam down into the beams that are coming up, it's actually banged in from the side. So instead of the top beam being on top of the two beams, it's flush with the height of the two beams, and the way how it stands is you're banging nails from the side. Both cases are a ches, but the second case, the roof of the ches is even to the height of the two legs of the ches. Over there, says the Taz, it's kosher. That would not be considered min hatzad. Lamaisa, we paskin even b'chahai gavin, it's possible. Lamaisa, even in these scenarios of min hatzad, which what we said now, the standard min hatzad would be is, let's say you have the beam 2 feet down in between the two beams that are coming up. That would be a regular case min hatzad, or maybe that's even also a shaila, but the simple case min hatzad is if the beam is attached, banged on the side of the two beams. What happens, I'm just going to bring up the shaila lamara mokam for the olam to handle. What happens if it's beautiful on top? You have two poles going up, and the string is on top beautifully. However, the two poles are both slanted inwards into the property, or outwards outside the property, or they're, in those two cases, these are machlokes. The Chachma Shloima says that it's possible. Why? Even though the string is right on top of the two poles, but Lamaisa, the two poles are facing into the property, so it's not really considered on top of the two poles, the string, even though it really is. It's right on top of the two poles. But since the two poles are on a slant, the string is only on the top of the two poles, not on top of the whole two poles, the whole yud tvachim. And the same would be if it's facing outward. The Chazon Ish, Ayin Aleph, I think it's the same Sifkot and Vav, says that it's kosher. This shaila is also negeya, and this is actually more negeya. Sometimes you make the string so tight the poles, the beams pull inwards, which means they're both facing each other. Or sometimes even they're facing outward. So over there, when it's facing inward, outward, there's also a shmuz about it. You could check this Sharetzion, Shin Samach Gimel, Sif Katan Yud Aleph, pretty long Sharetzion. The Chazanish over there also, Sif Katan Yud Aleph, to speak about these cases when it's facing inwards or outwards. But this is also, it's not a real chasarin min atzad, but to some extent it's min atzad because the string, even if it's above the top of the pole, most of the pole is facing outwards, facing inwards, this direction, any other direction, except for being right beneath the string.
If it's outwards, it's really on top of the whole pole, not directly, but it's sitting on top of the entire pole.
You're saying when it's outwards, it's on top because Lamaisa, interesting point what you're saying, that Lamaisa, the string goes, it's slanty, long as it moves out, the whole thing is covered with a string. I hear the svara. Yehuda, you have a good point. Lamaisa, the Chazanish in this case says that it's not good, and he says the reason is because it's not a Tzuras HaPesach. So I made a mistake by mixing all the cases together. The first case is sticking the beams bending into the Rishus or out of the Rishus. Over there it's very clearly it's a discussion of whether it's called Menatzad. But you have a good point, Taka, whether if the beams are facing outwards, you say, no, that's not called Menatzad, because B'Yisoidoi, the string is on top of the beam, even though the beam's on a slant. But they have a different issue. The issue is that it's not called Tzuras HaPesach. That's not an Amala door. I think when it's facing inwards and outwards, B'Yisoidoi, the door is a normal door. It's a ches. The ches is tipping in, tipping out, as opposed to when the doorway is facing out or facing in. That's not a normal doorway.
That's a whole new problem.
Right. Two separate problems. Very, very good what you pointed out. Very good. If the whole doorway is a normal doorway, but just imagine your doorway is facing outwards, or the whole doorway is facing inwards. So the doorway is a doorway, but there's a chasar that it's not. The shaila is machlokes if it is a chasar that the string is not on top of it. In other words, maybe it's called menatzad, even though it really is on top of the doorway, but it's only on top of the top part of the two sides, not on top of the whole thing. But when it's facing the doorpost, the two sides are facing either outwards or inwards, that's a different problem. That's already a problem that it's not a Tzuras HaPesach. What happens if you have a Tzuras HaPesach? You have a good Tzuras HaPesach. But together with the Tzuras HaPesach, you also have problematic beams. You have two. You have regular Tzuras HaPesach and a Tzuras HaPesach that's not good. And I'll give you an example. If you take a look, now that we're starting to learn, you look more, and hopefully Be'ez Hashem will try to even arrange that we could take call it a field trip, a tour with the ones that check the Eiruv to see it taka hands-on. But if you take a look in the different sections of the Eiruv and the poles, the telephone poles, wires are used, they don't use the actual telephone pole. Why? Because the wires don't run on top of the telephone pole, they run on the side. So that's a very typical classical case of Meratzat. So how did they use it? How did they use the telephone poles? The teretz is, you take a look, on the telephone pole, they have attached like a white pipe or whatever color it is that runs right where the wires go across, not on top of the telephone pole, but they run alongside the telephone pole. So they put a white pipe that's yut 10 tvachim, doesn't have to reach all the way till the wires, 10 tvachim, and the rest you say good asig as if it goes up till the wires. So Mela, that's good. It's not called menatzad. That's why they take care of this issue. Lamaisa, there's a din. The Mishnah Brewer brings Sivkat and Samachei, the Sharetzion in Sivkat and Peivav, that Mepnei Aroyim, so to speak, a Marasayan, people are going to think that you're using a not good Tzuras HaPesach, which means if you're going to have a pipe, a side pole, one has that the Eiruv goes on top of it, and one that goes on the side of it. So you have two of them. You should remove the one that the string goes on the side of it, because people are going to see, this is an Eiruv. Now that we're learning Eiruv, right? You're going to take a walk, you're going to look around, and you're going to see, this is Taka the Eiruv, but interesting, look, they have the string on the side. The Roya is going to think this is the Eiruv, but Lamaisa, the person doesn't need this one, he has a few feet down, he has a different one. So Mepnei HaRoyim, you're supposed to take away the beams that are not kosher, which means that the string runs on the side of it, not on top. Lamaisa, the poskim say, so what happens over here when you use the telephone poles? We're putting those white pipes, we're not taking away the telephone poles that run alongside the pipe, we're not doing that. So the din is, b'mokim de'i efsher, if you can't, then you could be soymech, and you could use, in other words, you have to have kosher poles that the wire goes on top of it, but you do not have to remove the wires, the other wires.
Rabbi Shiner, I'm sorry, just a quick question.
Sure.
Didn't we say before that we didn't need a beam, we could use a string because a tzuras HaPesach is a tzuras HaPesach? We don't worry about hecker or any what anybody else perceives as the tzuras HaPesach. So if the tzuras HaPesach is still the tzuras HaPesach, why are we worried about what people are going to say or whatever? If the tzuras HaPesach is still really there, it should still be kosher. Why are we choshish for this? If we weren't choshish for the hecker before, why are we choshish for Marasayan over here?
Very good, very well asked, and I'm just going to repeat the question for others to hear. You're asking very good. We mentioned before and very clearly that the string on top does not have to be visible. Meaning to say, it's not there for hecker, for people like by a movie. We're not going to get into the halachas that you have to have a tefach, and people should remember and know where they can carry. We're just trying to accomplish to close in the area. So if you don't need a hecker, why are we concerned over here that if you're going to have some of the poles, let's call these poles and the string on top, some of the poles that are not kosher because the string rungs on the side, what are we concerned about? That's a good question. But the difference is the following. The string on top, if you don't see the string, you don't see the string. It doesn't have to remind you that you could carry because it's a string. You could carry because it's a Rishus HaYachid. It's closed in. That's it. That's why you can carry. It doesn't have to remind you anything. Even if you can't see the string, as long as you know your property, you could carry where your property is. You have it stringed in. You could carry there. At this point, we have a different concern. But Pnei HaRoyim, we learned in Hilchos Basav, a Chalav, different maras ayin, if you can have a par of a schnitzel with cheese on it, all different things. Here we're concerned, a maras ayin, that people are going to think that you built an Eiruv a puzzle away. Whether they're going to think that you're allowed to make an Eiruv this way, or they're going to think, look at this person, he doesn't know how to build an Eiruv. That's what we're concerned about. Before, in the Eiruv, with the string, you could carry in your property. We're not worried that you need a reminder where and what and how you could carry. But now we're concerned that people are going to see your Eiruv. People are going to see you walk along the telephone poles here a Muncie, and they're going to say, you can carry a Muncie because of the telephone poles. But look, the telephone poles are on the side of the wire. So maybe Minatzad is good. So when I'm going to go next week to the mountains and I'm going to build an Eiruv around my property, I'm going to put poles and I'm going to just put the string on the side because that's what I see they do over here. So people are going to make a mistake in Pnei HaRoyim, therefore you should remove it. However, b'mokum de'i afshir, say the poskim, it's okay. So therefore, obviously it's afshir to remove the telephone pole. So maybe you could rely, even though some of the poles are minatzad, actually all the telephone poles are minatzad, but we put the plastic, thank you to the ones who built the Eiruv, they put plastic, they get permission, it's a whole avoida. We have kosher poles that are good, that are under the string, and the mela it's kosher. Being that we need that the string should be on top of the pole, like we said, not minatzad. There's an interesting discussion in the poskim. The pashtus, it's not an issue, but how do you usually put the string on top of the pole. I mean, you could when you put from the string from one pole to the next pole, obviously you want it to be somewhat attached to the pole, because if not, it's very long, it's going to be moved, and you just want it to be sturdy from one pole to the next. Or even if you pull it from one side of your property to the other side, you need it attached to the pole. So you can't put it around your pole, because that's going to be minatzad. That is problematic. That you cannot do. You cannot put around the pole. So what do? You bang a nail on top of the pole. If it's a wooden pole, you put a nail in on top. And then you put the string from one end to the other end, and you put it around the nail, and then you take a turn to the next end of your property. So technically that's very good. And it's mavur in the poskim that it's good. Mishpat says Zov, Mar Sham, Karen LeDavid, the Binyan Sion Pashas brings from Rassan Adler. Pashas in the Mishnah Berurah, it's like that. You'll soon see why I'm saying the Pashas this way, because there are those that are a little bit hesitant. But the Pashas, it's considered not minatzad, but on top. Why is it on top? Because it's on top of the poles. It's beautiful. It's excellent. However, some, whether if they're machmer or they take a little bit of issue, that since the pole at this point ends with the nail on top, so what's called on top as opposed to minatzad? You know what's called on top now? On top means on top of the nail, because that's the top of the beam. You have to, Atzuras HaPesach, that it should not be problematic, that it shouldn't be minatzad, means that the string runs on top of the two beams. So technically, if you go around the nail, we said it's good because it's on top of the beam. But some are concerned that no, now the top of the beam is on top of the nail, and if it's on top of the nail, what's now? On top of the nail comes out, when you go around the nail to anchor it to the pole, you're weiter not on top, or rather minatzad. For this, there are three different solutions if you want to be concerned about this. Number one, brought in the poskim today, the svarim. Number one, bang the nail all the way into the wood. Obviously, you'll put the string around the nail, but just a technical thing, bang the nail down to the wood. So if you bang the nail down to the wood, the top of your beam is the same as the top of the nail. It's all the same. And you have that string tightened around your screw, your nail, it's perfect. If the nail's up, so then maybe your side beam goes a little higher. But since the nail's all the way down to the bottom of the beam, to the top of the beam, but it's all the way down, flush with the beam, so maybe the string is now on top of the beam. It's perfect. Another,
even though it's under,
yeah.
Even though it's under the head of the nail.
Yes, it's under the head of the nail, but that much you're saying, we'll get to it, is that shmuz also, let's say if you have a little bit of a groove inside. Here, when the nail goes down, so you're saying it's like a little bit going under, interesting taka, what it should be, it's under the head of the nail, and the head of the nail, no matter what, goes down, even if it's flush with the wood, or if it's not flush, that's the top. I hear, interesting. You're saying maybe it shouldn't be eitzah. Another eitzah would be if you go around the nail, some bring it, then go over the nail. So if you go over the nail, so then it's for sure not minatzad. And then the third eitzah, the Beis Shlomo already brings it, instead of putting a nail, you could put like a little V hook, or whatever you want to call it, like a U, a little piece, and you bang that down to hold it down, so that it's weiter, it's not minatzad. I mean, Yehuda could be over there also. You could wonder if now that little hook, that little V, that's the top. Interesting shaila. Maybe that little bit already becomes bottle, but these are eitzes. Should you want to be makar, the pashtas, we're not concerned. You have a nail on top of your beam, you go around it, make sure obviously that the nail's on top of your beam. Not, if let's say it's a small thin beam, a 1x1, and you have a long nail and the nail's on an angle and the nail's off over the beam and you put the string around it, it's weiter minatzad. But if it's on top, even if it's higher up, you go around the nail, that's fine. And this taka l'chayra would answer Yehuda your shayla also, that lamaisa the top of the nail. The poskim say let's take another scenario. Forget about a nail. You have the two beams on the two sides, but you want the string to go around your property. How is it going to go around? You have a different eitzah. You make a little sliver hole, a groove in the beam, and the string runs along the groove through the wood. Is mavur in the poskim like this. If the groove is literally, it's flush with the top of the beam, which means that the string runs across the beam, but it's mamish on the top, then it's kosher. That's not a shaila, it's not a problem in atzad. As opposed to, if the hole is already a little deeper, which that's the mistaber to do, to make a deeper hole, because if it's only a little bit, a little wind will lift it right over, then already the poskim, the Mishnah Berurah brings Sivkot and Samachtal from the Pri Megadim, there are poskim that are mitzadid lahachmir. Me'idoch the Chazon Ish is mekel, even when the groove is a little deeper, because l'maisa zok the Chazon Ish, that's called al gabav. It doesn't bother me that it's an inch down into the wood. L'maisa it's on top of the beam. It's also there's some wood on the side. That's not a chesaron of al gabav of minatzad. But I think that much. When you bang the nail in and it's right beneath the nail, l'cha'oira, that should be included b'doyma to like when there's a little groove mamish right on top of the beam, and it would be kosher. Atkan is halachas. There are more, but we could try to open up and speak partially. I just want to speak a bit on the general halachas of Tzuras HaPesach. These general halachas, these are Tzuras HaPesach the top and the Tzuras HaPesach the side. I want to speak a little bit on the top, ubefrat, because we're talking about min atzad. These are psul that is mavur, and some of the Rishonim that understand the psul min atzad. It's not like what we're learning till now, that the string is on the side, the top is on the side, but rather they understand that the whole Tzuras HaPesach is on the side. What's a good example? You have a property, you don't live in a place in an Eiruv, you want to make an Eiruv around your property. 3 sides have a beautiful gate. Your front also has a gate. The only place that doesn't have is your driveway. That's on the side. And over there you want to make a Tzuras HaPesach. Zok the Rif, Tzuras HaPesach, a door you don't make on the side. You come in through the middle. And the if the doorway, the Tzuras HaPesach is on the side, it's possible. That's another oifen of a psul and Tzuras HaPesach, but this has nothing to do in the particular on the top part. It's all in all the whole Tzuras HaPesach. Another din in Tzuras HaPesach, a Tzuras HaPesach, which is a doorway, means that you can walk through the door. What happens if you can't walk through the door? You know what an example is? Very also standard example. Your backyard, you have bushes in your backyard. Your whole backyard between you and your neighbor is bushes. No, if the bushes are 10 tvachim, very good, that's a machitza. It's less than 10 tvachim, so you don't have a machitza. So what's the eitzah right now? You're going to do is you're going to put one pole on one side of your property, another pole on the other side, and you pull a string across. Gavaldik moiridik Tzuras HaPesach. It's excellent. The thing is, Tzuras HaPesach means it's a doorway. When you have the bushes over there, you can't get through. It's a problem. So Lamaisa, this is a shaila. It's a big discussion in the poskim lakan or lakan. If it's less than 3 tvachim, which means the bushes are so low, it's only less than 3 tvachim, but above the 3 tvachim, till your string, you have 10 tvachim, that the pashas, the poskim say is okay. If you do not, it's a big shaila, but there is a eitzah. You could move the poles and the string into your property, even right next to the bushes. You want your kids should be able to play in the whole property up until the bushes. Let the bushes be right outside the Tzuras HaPesach. And zogen the poskim, the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish is siman ayin sivkot in your tests, that it doesn't lack in the Tzuras HaPesach. Why? The Tzuras HaPesach is a doorway. You have your property inside your property, plus you have a doorway. Right outside the door, you open your door and you can't go out. No, that doesn't take away the doorway. If there's something inside the doorway, so that's not a doorway. But if your property is gavaldik, you have a doorway and you can walk through the door, not outside the door, but there's a doorway to go into the doorway. Zok the Chazanish, it's good. So Mamela, if you have bushes in your backyard and you're putting up the poles, you should be careful and make sure that it doesn't go over the bushes, but rather in such a case where if it's Yud Tvachim, you don't even have to do it. And if it's less than Yud Tvachim, make the poles right outside. The bushes should be outside of your Eiruv. Does one have to make the Eiruv, the poles, the string on top, L'Shem Eiruv? They have to put it up L'Shem Eiruv. Is there then L'Shema? The Mishkanas Yaakov, others say that you have to build it L'Shem Eiruv. L'Maisa, Shvus Yaakov, Marsham, a list say that you don't have to build it L'Shem Eiruv. The Shvus Yaakov is Chelik Beis, Simen Ches, Marsham is Chelik Beis, Simen Kuf Mem Tes. And this is very negay. If we use the telephone wires and the telephone poles, they did not put it up L'Shem Eiruv. No, why is it good? Because even if it's not put up L'Shem Eiruv, and the poskim explain, there's no din over here, L'Shem, L'Shma, if it's Dinei, Chalois Eiruv. Pashut, practical, balabatish, you need walls, or a mechitza, or either a mechitza or tzuras HaPesach. So if you have a tzuras HaPesach, it's excellent, it's perfect, and that's it. It's important to note one last thing, and then we're going to make a sikum. It's important to note that all this that we're speaking about, we only started to speak about the string on top, a part of the Tzuras HaPesach. This is all one part of Eiruv, meaning to say, this is, if you live residential, your own house, you want to make an Eiruv, this is, we're starting to learn the halachas of an Eiruv around your property. However, if you're in a bungalow colony, you live in a development, a complex, and over there, Muncie, you want to carry from your house into the chutzner, into the parking lot. Over there, there's a halacha, even though it's a reshus hayachid, there's a halacha, you have a tenant, and you want to carry from your reshus into the tenant's reshus. It's a regular reshus hayachid. You have perfect walls, tzuras HaPesach, you name it, it's good. However, there's a din, machlokes rishonim, and why Rashi says, Mishmur brings the reason. The Chachamim said you have to make an Eiruv Chatzeros with matzah. You have to make an Eiruv Chatzeros, and the reason for that is because the Chachamim will chayshish that somebody's going to see it, or you're going to think you're carrying from your house into the yard, even though it's all Rosh Hashanah. You might think that if you let it carry from my house to my yard, again, when the yard is a sheared yard, you might think you let it carry from your house into Rosh Hashanah, which is an Issa D'Oraisa. So maybe you have to make an Eiruv Chatzeros. We're not going into it. That's its own din, and Chelik Daled, the Mishnah Berurah, Eiruv Chatzeros has its whole set of halachas. But just to bring out, we're speaking about you live in your own property, or if you tackle the Muncie Eiruv, or anything, you have to come onto Eiruv when you're shearing property, but not to carry within the chutzner itself. You want to carry from your house into the chutzner. Besides this Eiruv, you need an Eiruv Chatzeros. So just to make a summary of what we spoke about, and I believe the way to sum up a lot of what we spoke about tonight would speak about making an Eiruv with the telephone poles and the telephone wires. So far of what we spoke, there could be 4 issues to address. Number 1, the wires are minatzad, right? The wires are not on top of the telephone pole, they're on the side. For that, we said the solution is they put that white piping or black or whatever color it is, and that pipe runs right on the side, but on the side where the wires are right on top of it. Doesn't have to go all the way up, but it goes up 10 tvachim, and that's good. But just to point out, on the wires, there are 2 wires that run. These electric wires and the phone wires. You'll see some of the wires are not right on the beam, not on the telephone pole. They're on like such a hook, such a metal, and it sticks it out a little bit. Those wires we can't even use, even with that piece of plastic that we put on to the telephone pole. Why? Because that plastic that we put on, that pipe, has to be that when you look up from the pipe, it would hit a wire. The wires that are not right sitting on the telephone pole, but actually a little bit off, a couple of inches off, that pipe's not going to help. So one, so to speak, issue that could be is minatzad. We took care of that. We put pipes. the next, call it an issue, but the next nidun is lagabe sagging. We spoke about sagging could be an issue. The Sharatzin says to be careful about it, to straighten it out. We're not straightening out the wires, but we saw from some of the poskim that say up to 3 tfachim, sagging is okay. Another shaila that could come up is if it wasn't put l'shem Eiruv, and we saw l'maisa you do not need it to be put l'shem Eiruv, even if you put up, it's there for some other reason, they put up tzuras HaPesach, it happens to just be, it's a good tzuras HaPesach, you could use it. And then lastly, we also said that there could be a shaila of marasayin using the telephone poles. You could put up your white or black piping, but l'maisa the telephone poles are also there. So there also we saw, even though if you could remove it, you should, but often you can't remove it, you don't have to, and Mamela, that will not be an issue. Be'ez Hashem will continue in Eruvin. Have a wonderful night.